It was supposed to be a quiet Saturday morning, the kind where the sun rises slow and golden over the rooftops, and the only thing on Maya Johnson's mind was whether to water her hydrangeas or finish her coffee first. She'd lived in Willow Creek for less than a year, but already she'd learned that peace in this neighborhood was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the smallest ripple. Maya was used to being watched. Her years in the CIA had taught her to expect it, but she'd never expected the kind of scrutiny that came from the Willow Creek HOA. It started with the little things. A note about her grass being half an inch too long, a warning about her recycling bin being visible from the street, a neighbor's complaint about the color of her front door. Maya handled it all with a polite smile and a quiet resolve, never letting on that she was more than just another homeowner. But the HOA wasn't satisfied with polite compliance. They wanted control, and when they couldn't get it, they sent their so-called security officers, 2 men in dark uniforms with shiny badges that looked official at glance, but to Maya's trained eye were nothing but cheap imitations. That morning, as Maya sat on her porch, the 2 men strode up the walkway with a sense of purpose that was almost theatrical. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the tall one barked, his hand already reaching for her arm. "You're in violation of HOA bylaws and are being detained for questioning." Maya's eyes narrowed, her instincts flaring. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. The second officer, bulkier and bald, flashed a badge that read HOA Security and muttered something about unauthorized gatherings and suspicious activity. Maya stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "I know my rights. You have no authority to detain me on my own property." But the men weren't listening. With a practiced motion, they each grabbed one of her arms, yanking her up from her porch chair. Maya's coffee cup crashed to the floor, shattering the morning calm. She struggled, not out of fear, but out of principle. She knew these men were fakes, and she wasn't about to let them make an example of her. "Let go of me!" she shouted, her voice echoing down the street. Neighbors peeked through blinds and over fences, some with phones in hand, but no one moved to help. The officers dragged her down the steps, their grips tight and faces set in grim determination. Maya's mind raced through her options. She could fight back, but that would only escalate things. Instead, she did what she'd been trained to do. She waited for a moment. As they reached the sidewalk, the taller officer leaned in, his voice a low growl. "You people think you can do whatever you want. Not in this neighborhood." Maya met his gaze, her eyes cold and unblinking. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." At that moment, a black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. The windows slid down and a woman in sunglasses flashed a badge, this one real, gleaming in the sunlight. "That's enough," she called, her voice carrying the weight of command. The fake cops froze, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Maya smiled a slow, knowing smile. "You boys really should have checked who you were messing with." Within moments, 2 more vehicles appeared, blocking the street. Real law enforcement officers stepped out, weapons holstered but hands ready, their eyes locked on the imposters. The neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered on their lawns, phones out, recording every second. The HOA president, Linda, appeared at the edge of the crowd, her face pale as she realized the situation was spiraling out of control. The officers moved in, separating Maya from the fake cops, reading them their rights as they cuffed them and led them away. Maya dusted herself off, her composure unshaken. She turned to the crowd, her voice clear and strong. "Let this be a lesson. Not everyone who claims authority has it. Know your rights. Stand your ground. And never, ever let fear silence you." The neighbors murmured, some embarrassed, others inspired. Linda tried to regain control, insisting that the HOA had only been trying to maintain standards, but no one was listening. The real police took statements. The imposters were loaded into the back of a squad car, and Maya returned to her porch, her coffee still warm, her book waiting. She knew this wasn't the end. There would be questions, investigations, maybe even more trouble down the line. But for now, she was content to sit in the sun, a quiet force in a neighborhood that would never look at her the same way again. The days after the incident felt like a storm had passed, but the air was still charged with electricity. Maya's porch, once a place of quiet solitude, became the center of neighborhood whispers and sideways glances. Some neighbors avoided eye contact, hustling their kids inside when she walked by, while others offered awkward smiles or tentative waves, unsure whether to treat her as a victim, a hero, or a threat. The HOA president, Linda, sent a formal letter apologizing for the misunderstanding and promising a full review of security procedures. But Maya could read between the lines. There was no real remorse, only damage control. The local news picked up the story, and soon headlines blared. Fake HOA cops arrested after dragging woman off porch. Victim revealed as CIA agent. Maya's phone buzzed with messages from old colleagues, some congratulating her on her composure, others joking that she'd finally blown her cover in the most suburban way possible. She laughed it off, but inside she felt a simmering anger. She'd spent her life serving her country, operating in the shadows, and now, in a quiet American neighborhood, she'd been targeted for nothing more than sitting on her own porch. The police investigation moved quickly. The two fake officers were charged with impersonating law enforcement, assault, and attempted kidnapping. Their backgrounds revealed a history of overreach, other neighborhoods, other victims, always targeting those they thought wouldn't fight back. Maya gave her statement with the same calm precision she'd used in 100 debriefings, but she made sure to emphasize one thing. This happened because people let fear and prejudice guide their actions. It's not just about me. It's about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. The word struck a chord. At the next HOA meeting, the community center was packed. Linda tried to steer the conversation back to landscaping and parking violations, but the residents weren't having it. One by one, people stood up to share their own stories, of being harassed for minor infractions, of feeling watched and judged, of being made to feel like outsiders in their own homes. Maya sat quietly in the back, listening, her presence a silent reminder that change was possible. When it was her turn to speak, she stood and faced a room. "Authority is a responsibility, not a weapon," she said. "If we want to be a real community, we have to look out for each other, not just enforce rules. We have to ask who benefits when fear is used to control and who gets hurt." The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started to clap, and soon the whole room joined in. Linda looked flustered, but she couldn't ignore the shift in the room. The board agreed to review the HOA's bylaws, to disband the so-called security division, and to create a committee open to all residents to ensure that everyone's voice was heard. Maya was asked to join, but she declined a formal role, preferring to work quietly behind the scenes. She helped organize neighborhood safety workshops, inviting real law enforcement to teach residents how to spot fake credentials and what to do if they felt threatened. She encouraged her neighbors to get to know each other, to build trust instead of suspicion. Slowly, the atmosphere in Willow Creek began to change. People started talking to each other again, sharing stories and meals, watching out for each other's kids. The fear that had once hung over the neighborhood began to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism. Maya found herself invited to backyard barbecues and block parties, her reputation as a CIA lady now a source of pride and curiosity rather than fear. She answered questions with a smile, always careful not to reveal too much, but she made it clear that her real mission was simple: to help her community heal and grow stronger. As summer turned to fall, Maya sat on her porch one evening, watching the sun set over the rooftops. She thought about all the places she'd been, all the missions she'd completed, and realized that sometimes the hardest battles were the ones fought at home. She was proud of her neighbors, proud of herself, and grateful for the chance to turn a moment of injustice into a catalyst for change. As autumn deepened, the story of Maya's porch confrontation became a kind of legend in Willow Creek, retold at backyard gatherings and whispered about at the mailbox. The image of her being dragged off her own steps by men in fake uniforms, only for the truth to explode in their faces, became a symbol of both the dangers of unchecked authority and the power of standing your ground. Maya noticed the subtle changes first. Neighbors who once kept their distance now stopped to chat, asking for advice on everything from home security to how to handle HOA complaints. Parents encouraged their children to wave at her, and the local high school even invited her to speak about community safety and personal empowerment. Maya accepted, standing in front of a room full of teenagers and telling them, "Never let anyone make you feel powerless in your own home. Know your rights. Trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to ask for help. The students listened, rapt, and afterward a few approached her with questions about her career, their eyes wide with admiration. Meanwhile, the HOA board's promised reforms began to take shape. The so-called security division was officially dissolved, and the board, under pressure from residents, rewrote the bylaws to clarify the limits of HOA authority. New rules required all HOA representatives to wear clear identification and prohibited any form of physical enforcement. The board also established a neighborhood watch program, but this time it was truly volunteer-based, focused on community support rather than surveillance. Maya was asked to help train the volunteers, and she agreed, teaching them not just about safety, but about respect, de-escalation, and the importance of inclusion. The police, too, took lessons from the incident. The chief visited Maya personally to thank her for her composure and to assure her that the department was reviewing its own protocols for responding to HOA-related calls. "We should have seen through those uniforms sooner," he admitted. "You reminded us that real authority comes with real responsibility." Maya appreciated the gesture, but she knew the work wasn't finished. She continued to encourage her neighbors to look out for one another, to report suspicious activity, but also to question anyone who claimed power without proof. She helped organize block parties, potlucks, and even a community garden, all designed to bring people together and rebuild trust. The transformation was slow, but it was real. The fear that had once hung over Willow Creek faded, replaced by a sense of shared purpose. People began to see Maya not just as a woman who had stood up to the fake cops, but as a neighbor, a mentor, and a friend. She found herself feeling more at home than she had in years, grateful for the chance to put down roots and make a difference. One evening, as she walked her dog through quiet streets, Maya paused to watch a group of children playing tag on a freshly mowed lawn. Their laughter echoed in the twilight, and she smiled, knowing that the neighborhood was finally becoming the safe, welcoming place she'd hoped for. She thought about her years in the CIA, about all the time she'd had to move on before she could truly settle in, and realized that this time she didn't want to leave. She'd found her place, not just as a protector, but as a part of something bigger. And as the first leaf began to fall, Maya knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she and her neighbors would face them together, stronger and more united than ever before. Winter crept into Willow Creek with a hush, blanketing the lawns and rooftops in soft white, and giving the neighborhood a sense of fresh possibility. For Maya, the season brought a quiet satisfaction, a feeling that the storm had passed and something better had taken root. The porch where she'd once been dragged away was now a gathering place, decorated with twinkling lights and a welcome mat that saw more visitors than ever before. Neighbors stopped by with holiday treats. Children left handmade cards, and even Linda, the once feared HOA president, came bearing a peace offering of homemade cookies and a sincere apology. The board's reforms had stuck. The new bylaws were fair, the neighborhood watch was thriving, and the culture of suspicion had been replaced by one of support and openness. Maya's story had traveled far beyond Willow Creek, inspiring other communities to question their own rules and the people who enforced them. She received letters from strangers thanking her for her courage, and invitations to speak at town halls and community centers. Each time, she told the same truth. Real safety comes from knowing your neighbors, not fearing them. Stand up for yourself, but also stand together. The police chief invited her to help design a training program for officers on how to handle HOA disputes and spot impersonators, and Maya gladly accepted, eager to turn her experience into something that would protect others. As the year drew to a close, the neighborhood gathered for a winter festival on the green. There was music, laughter, and a bonfire that crackled into the night. Maya stood among her neighbors, no longer just a CIA lady, but a friend, a mentor, and a symbol of what could happen when one person refused to be intimidated. She looked around at the faces, old and young, new arrivals and lifelong residents, and felt a deep sense of belonging. The pain and fear of that summer day had faded, replaced by pride and hope. As snowflakes drifted down and the festival wound to a close, Maya returned to her porch, wrapped in a warm scarf and holding a mug of cocoa. She sat for a long time, watching the lights twinkle and the world grow quiet, grateful for the peace she'd helped create. She knew there would always be challenges, new faces, new rules, new tests of courage. But she also knew that Willow Creek was ready for them. The neighborhood had learned to trust itself, to question authority, and to come together when it mattered most. And as Maya looked out over the peaceful street, she smiled, knowing that her story was now part of something bigger, a legacy of strength, unity, and the quiet power of standing your ground.